Have you ever felt like you were screaming on the inside and no one could hear? Melancholics don't just feel sadness, they feel the world in an intense, deep, and quiet way. It's not drama, it's structure. From an early age, many develop an almost surgical perception of emotions, but rarely feel truly seen in return. This lack of emotional mirroring can create what psychoanalysis calls a narcissistic wound, a pain tied to not having one's essence recognized. And it's not about vanity, it's about identity. But why does this feeling of being misunderstood keep repeating, even with those closest to us?
Melancholics communicate in layers. They speak with their eyes, with silences, with subtle gestures. But they live in a world that replies in haste, with ready-made phrases like, "That's all in your head." In Lacan's theory, this creates a disconnect between the subject of the unconscious and the symbolic other, between who you really are and how the world responds. This constant frustration leads to silence, a silence filled with disappointment. Many stop trying to explain themselves because they realize that few really know or even want to listen. And when silence becomes the only safe space, what happens to human connection? Freud observed that in melancholia, the subject invests deeply in their affections. When there is loss, rejection, or disappointment, it's not just the other that's gone. A part of the self breaks too. That's why melancholics often experience intense relationships that are equally frustrating. They don't seek just company. They long for a connection that sees them fully. They want to be read, felt, understood without having to scream for it. But that expectation, even if unconscious, is rarely fulfilled. And when it's not, the harshest judgment doesn't usually come from others, but from within.
In psychoanalysis, there's a clear distinction between mourning and melancholia. In mourning, we know what was lost. In melancholia, the loss is diffuse, and the guilt turns inward. Thoughts like, if no one understands me, maybe I'm not worth understanding, arise frequently. This quiet self-criticism, fueled by a constant pursuit of perfection, gradually erodes self-worth. The pain doesn't explode, it implodes. Often suffering shows up in small gestures, withdrawal, giving up on trying to explain, or feeling constantly inadequate. But is this guilt really yours? Or was it passed down unnoticed?
At the core, melancholics carry a persistent fantasy to be understood without needing to decode every emotion. Melanie Klein identified in this psychic structure a deep desire for repair, not only of one's own pain, but of the world's. This leads to existential exhaustion. Even surrounded by people, melancholics often feel exiled, not from lack of love, but from lack of resonance. The longing isn't just to be heard, but to be felt, a rare thing in times of noise and superficiality. And when that longing finds no echo, solitude stops being a choice and becomes a shelter.
One of the greatest paradoxes of the melancholic temperament is that it can look cold on the outside, even when burning inside. Rationality, control, and a composed appearance confuse those nearby. The pain is hidden, sometimes even from the one who feels it. Others don't see suffering because it wears elegance. They don't notice the plea for care because it comes quietly, wrapped in lowered eyes and automatic answers. And the longer this mask is worn, the harder it becomes to remember it isn't the real face. Melancholic sensitivity is not a weakness. It's heightened perception. It's like having an emotional radar that's always on. But in a world that prizes speed, productivity, and shallow optimism, this sensitivity becomes a problem. Melancholics unsettle others without meaning to, because they see too much. They perceive what others try to hide, and that lucidity, even when silent, can be uncomfortable to those who cling to the surface. As psychoanalysts have noted, the person who accesses the deepest layers of the unconscious is often rejected, not for being wrong, but for being a mirror. And maybe that's why so many turn away from those most capable of truly understanding them.
Here's what really matters. You're not alone. If this content resonated with you, it's because there's a shared thread, a recognizable silence, a familiar pain. And if someone else feels the way you do, then true connection is possible. This channel exists for that, to create a space where melancholics can see themselves, hear themselves, and above all, feel recognized. If this video spoke to you, like it. That tells the algorithm this topic matters. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe to the channel, because here, sensitivity is not something to fix. It's a strength to nurture. Let's turn silence into language and pain into power.